Bees are flying insects that belong to a class of animals called pollinators. Pollinators are responsible for moving pollen from one part of a flower to another to allow plants to produce fruit or seeds. It is this pollination process that sustains 70 of the top 100 crops grown by humans, thus providing 90% of the world's nutrition. Since 2006, the honeybee population of the world has been in drastic decline. While some loss each season is normal, in 2006, beekeepers saw up to 90% of their colonies disappear. This tragedy of bees abandoning seemingly healthy hives was given the name colony collapse disorder. As bees disappear, so do many plants that rely on pollination to survive, and the animals that live in and feed on them. The causes for colony collapse disorder are multiple and interacting. Immune system deficiency caused by pesticide use leaves bees with increased susceptibility to parasites and pathogens. Human development and changes in farming culture also impact on how far bees have to fly for a varied and nutritious diet. So as bees succumb to these parasites and pathogens, the task of flying further and further for good nutrition puts bees under increasing stress. After prolonged use, pests develop tolerance to pesticides. This forces companies to modify their products to increase effectiveness. In the early 90s, pesticide manufacturers developed a class of pesticides known as neonicotinoids. These pesticides disrupt the central nervous system in insects, and studies have shown that they impair danger perception skills in bees. While pesticide companies did short-term testing on adult bees and found no lasting effects, in 2013, professors from the University of Maryland discovered 6 different types of pesticides in pollen and wax samples taken from beehives in different crops. A recent study in Italy found that neonicotinoid exposure results in increased levels of a particular protein that inhibits the immune response in bees. This leaves them susceptible to viruses such as Nosema ceranae and parasites like the varroa mite. Dennis Van Engelsdorp from the University of Maryland likens the situation to AIDS in humans. Another cause of the colony collapse disorder is habitat loss. Since World War II, crops requiring bee pollination have increased 300%. We have switched from using cover crops for fertilization and pest control to synthetic fertilizers and toxic pesticides. We have also changed from planting many varieties of plants on a single farm to massive single crop farms. These crops, while being able to supply bees with pollen and nectar, limit nutrients for bees, so instead of getting a varied diet, bees eat the same type of pollen for a long time. An example of this is almond production in the United States. Almond pollen, being high in protein, is very good for bees. However, half the country's bee population must be shipped in to pollinate a single crop and shipped out after bloom because the crop becomes a flowerless landscape. Bees that are used as migratory pollinators will spend months at a time feeding off single crops while under the stress of being shipped to various locations for pollination. When single crop pollination is not needed, beekeepers feed their bees corn syrup due to lack of natural flowers to support their colonies. This lack of natural flowers is a direct result of human development, which also disrupts flight paths for bees collecting pollen from flowers. So how does all this affect us? With 1 in 3 bites of food that we eat pollinated by bees, without bees, our range of foods will drastically decrease, and costs of remaining foods will experience huge inflation due to demand. Bees also pollinate alfalfa, which is turned into hay for our dairy and meat cattle. Cotton, which supplies 35% of the world's fiber needs, is also pollinated by bees, so it's not just about food either. Things aren't all doom and gloom though, and there are steps we can take to ensure that we don't lose our pollinating friends. One simple thing we can do is to plant things that bees like. Herbs such as lavender, sage and thyme, and plants with long blooming cycles are all great for bees' nutrition. If you have a vegetable garden, let your plants go to bloom every once in a while. Buying organic produce from local farmers is also a great way to not only keep yourself healthy, but to keep the bees healthy.